Revenge office stories. I spend a lot of time scrolling through workplace justice forums, hunting for those truly satisfying stories. And every once in a while, you find one. A story so perfectly built, so deeply cathartic, that you just have to share it. This is one of those stories. It's about a woman who was so catastrophically underestimated that when she got fired, she didn't just leave her job. She legally dismantled the entire company on her way out. Now, it's important to know that the law and the specific license at the heart of the story are fictional constructs created for the narrative. They're what makes the story's perfect revenge possible. According to the tale, the moment she was fired, their whole multi-million-dollar business became illegal. She was the only person on earth who could fix it, and the panicked phone call from her ex-boss became the most satisfying moment of her life. This isn't just a story about getting even. It's a masterclass in knowing your worth. The moment I hung up on my screaming ex-boss, I took a calm sip of my coffee. Just 48 hours earlier, he'd fired me in front of the entire team, calling me a glorified secretary with a fancy piece of paper. What he didn't get was that when I walked out that door, the fancy piece of paper I took with me was their legal license to operate. I was the only person who could fix the mess he'd made, and they were already begging me to return. The panicked, sputtering phone call I'd just received was the most satisfying moment of my life, and it was only the beginning. To understand how a single employee could hold the keys to a whole corporate kingdom, you have to get the world this story is set in. The author, a woman we'll call Clara, was a specialist in a very, very niche field. She was a senior compliance officer for a high-flying environmental engineering firm. Let's call them Terracon Solutions. Terracon was a big deal, landing multi-million-dollar contracts for huge infrastructure projects. Bridges, power plants, you name it. They were the ones who made sure these massive projects didn't violate a maze of environmental laws. The cornerstone of their whole operation was a fictional federal law called the Federal Environmental Compliance and Safety Act of 2011, or FECSA. Think of FECSA as the final, unbreakable gatekeeper for any major construction in the U.S. It was a notoriously complex law, and to even submit a project for federal review, a company needed a certified principal federal assessor to sign off on every single page. This wasn't just a rubber stamp. The assessor's unique personal license number had to be embedded in the digital signature of every document uploaded to the federal portal. And here's the kicker, the detail the entire story hinges on. This license wasn't given to a company. It was given to an individual. It was non-transferable. It took years of study, a mountain of exams, and a spotless record to earn. And at Terracon Solutions, a company with 200 employees and a 9-figure revenue, there was exactly one person who held that license, Clara. She'd been with the company for 8 years, starting as a junior assistant. She was the one who saw the FECSA regulations coming and talked the original CEO into investing in her training. She spent 3 years of her life sacrificing nights and weekends to become an accredited assessor. When she finally passed, Terracon threw a party and hung her license in a fancy frame on the wall. For 5 years, she was the silent engine that powered the entire company. Every contract they won, every project they finished, every dollar they earned was because she and only she could give the final, legally binding sign-off. Her days were a blur of technical reports and environmental impact statements. She knew FECSA inside and out. She knew the federal auditors by name. Her signature was, without exaggeration, the company's most valuable asset. She wasn't a manager or an executive. She didn't have a corner office. To the accountants, she was just an administrative cost. But to the engineers and project managers, she was a lifesaver. They knew that when Clara reviewed a file, it was bulletproof. They knew her signature meant the project would sail through federal approval. She was respected, but in that quiet, taken-for-granted way foundational employees often are. She was part of the furniture. And the problem with furniture is people forget it's there until the day it's gone. The trouble started, as it often does, with new management. The old CEO, An engineer who actually understood the business retired. He was replaced by a man named Richard, or Rick, as he insisted everyone call him. Rick was a classic MBA stereotype who spoke in a constant stream of buzzwords like synergy and optimization. He saw the company not as a group of skilled people, but as a spreadsheet of assets and liabilities, and he was there to trim the fat. Rick knew nothing about engineering. He saw Clara's small team, which he called the paper pushers, as a cost center. In his mind, the engineers made money and everyone else was just overhead. They clashed almost right away. He'd question why a simple sign-off took days. "We need to be agile, Clara," he'd say, snapping his fingers. "Time is money." She would patiently try to explain the complexities of FEXA, the legal liability, the thousands of pages she had to personally verify. She'd explain that her signature wasn't just a formality, it was a legal declaration. He would just stare at her with a blank, dismissive smile. "Let's just streamline it," he'd counter, as if a federal law was something you could just streamline. The warning signs were everywhere. He cut her team's training budget. He denied her request for a new analyst. In meetings, he would publicly belittle her concerns. "Here comes the Department of No," he'd joke when she raised a compliance issue, and the other execs would offer weak little laughs. Clara felt the ground shifting. She had dedicated her career to this company, yet this new guy saw her as an obstacle. The respect she had earned over 8 years was just evaporating. The final straw came during a tense project meeting. A major client needed a submission pushed through on an impossible deadline. Rick promised them it would be done without even asking Clara. When she told him it was impossible to do a proper review that fast, that it would be reckless, he lost his temper. "I don't need a lecture, Clara," he snapped in front of 3 VPs. "I need a signature. Your job is to sign the documents the real talent produces. It's not that complicated." The disrespect was staggering, but she was loyal. She believed in protecting the company, even from its own leadership. She stayed late, worked through the weekend, and somehow got the review done, ensuring the submission was flawless. The client was happy, the contract was safe, and Rick took all the credit. He never even thanked her. That was the moment she realized it. She wasn't a valued employee. She was a tool. And to a man like Rick, tools are disposable. The end came on a Tuesday. It was brutal, fast, and deeply humiliating. Rick called her into his glass-walled office. The head of HR and 2 VPs were there, all looking incredibly uncomfortable. Rick, on the other hand, was practically glowing with arrogance. He didn't beat around the bush. "Clara," he began, "we're optimizing our workflows. As part of that, we've decided your position has become redundant. "I understand," she said finally. Her voice was still quiet, but had a strange new firmness. "Procedural bottlenecks can be difficult. Thank you for letting me know. Is there a timeline for when legal might complete their review?" "Hard to say," I replied quickly, eager to end this. "Could be a week, could be a month. The second I hear anything, you'll be the first to know." "I'd appreciate that," she said, rising from her chair. "Thank you for your time." She turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind her. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I did it. Sarah had bought it. She would wait, and eventually life would go on. I had managed the situation, protected my budget, and kept my best employee in her place. Leaning back, I looked out at the skyline, feeling a surge of satisfaction. I saw myself not as a liar, but as a pragmatist, a survivor. I had no idea that I hadn't just managed a situation. I had just lit the fuse on a bomb sitting directly under my career. And the quiet, unassuming woman who had just walked out of my office was holding the detonator. The days after the meeting bled into weeks, and things in the department returned to normal. Mark and Jessica were insufferably pleased with their raises, preening around the office like prize peacocks. The others were content enough. And Sarah Sarah was silent, but it was a new kind of silence. Not the comfortable, background quiet of a happy employee, but an active, charged silence. Her work was still perfect. Her reports were still early. But that quiet warmth she used to have was gone, replaced by a cool, impenetrable professionalism. She was a flawless, efficient, and utterly remote machine. At first, I figured she was just disappointed. It was natural. She was sulking. I gave it a week, then stopped by her desk for a casual check-in. "Hey, Sarah, just wanted to see how you're doing," I said, leaning against her cubicle wall. She looked up, her eyes neutral. "I'm fine, thank you. Working on the quarterly logistics analysis." Great. Listen." I lowered my voice conspiratorially. "I pinged legal again this morning. Still no update. It's a black hole over there. Incredibly frustrating. But I'm staying on them." Another lie, of course. I hadn't contacted anyone. She just nodded. "I appreciate the update." Then she turned right back to her spreadsheet. Conversation over. Her lack of engagement was unsettling. I'd expected questions, frustration, maybe even some tears I'd have to manage. This was different. It felt like she'd accepted my lie not as the truth, but as a line drawn in the sand. And she had simply chosen her side. Weeks turned into a month. My confidence grew. The stuck in legal gambit was a success. I even bragged about it, subtly, to another director over drinks. "Had a tough one with a senior analyst," I said, swirling the ice in my glass. "Top performer, budget was dry. Had to get creative with the explanation. Kicked the can down the road. Sometimes you just have to manage the narrative." My friend nodded. He got it. It was the cynical shorthand of middle management. Meanwhile, I noticed small changes in Sarah's routine. She started coming in earlier and leaving later. I saw her at the printer more, printing long, dense documents. Once, I walked past her desk and saw a book peeking from her bag. Something about employee rights and retaliation. A cold prickle of unease hit me, but I brushed it off. She was probably just curious, trying to understand the process I described. Good for her, I thought. A little self-education. Her silence was the defining feature of that time. She never mentioned the raise again. Not once. She didn't ask for updates or send follow-up emails. In team meetings, her status reports were concise, factual, and totally devoid of personality. She was a ghost in the machine. My own arrogance led me to a fatal mistake. I saw her silence as submission. I thought she'd recognized her powerlessness and had just resigned herself to her fate. I thought the quiet was the sound of her spirit breaking. I was a fool. It wasn't the silence of surrender. It was the silence of a predator stalking its prey. It was the quiet focus of a demolition expert planting charges. She wasn't sulking, she was preparing. She wasn't beaten, she was gathering evidence. She was giving me rope, and I was eagerly wrapping it around my own neck, proud of the intricate knot I was tying. I never once thought to look up and see who was building the gallows. By the end of the second month, I'd almost forgotten the whole thing. The lie was a distant, successful memory. That's when the process server walked into my office. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was on a conference call, pacing my office. My assistant buzzed me. "There's a gentleman here to see you," she said, her voice confused. "He doesn't have an appointment." "I'm on a call." "Tell him to schedule one," I snapped. "He says it's a legal matter and will only take a moment," she replied, a nervous edge in her voice. Legal matter. A jolt went through me. "Fine," I sighed, ending my call. "Send him in." The man who entered wasn't a lawyer. He was in a polo shirt and khakis, holding a large manila envelope. He looked bored. "Are you my name?" he asked flatly. "I am. Can I help you?" He didn't answer. He just held out the envelope. "You've been served," he said. I stared at him. Served? Served with what? This has to be a mistake. "No mistake," he said, pulling out a logbook. "Sign here, please." My hand trembled as I signed. I sank into my chair and tore the envelope open. The document inside was thick, official, and the words at the top made my blood run cold. Notice of civil lawsuit and summons. I scanned the text. The plaintiff was Sarah. She had filed a lawsuit against the company, and against me personally for retaliation and age discrimination. It was impossible. Quiet, meek Sarah. But the seal of a well-known employment law firm was at the bottom. This was very real. Attached to the summons was a subpoena dutses tecum. It was a legal order, compelling me to produce documents for the lawsuit. It was brutally specific. It demanded any and all communications, including emails, chat logs, and meeting notes, pertaining to the salary, compensation, or raise of employee Sarah last name. It demanded all documentation related to the departmental budget for salary increases, including allocation records and final approvals. And then the kill shot. Any and all communications with the corporate legal department regarding a review of Sarah, last name, as approved raise. My lie. My perfect, simple lie. She was calling my bluff on an epic scale. This wasn't an HR complaint. A lawsuit meant she had a lawyer. She had initiated a formal legal process that had just landed on my desk with explosive force. This changed the entire game. The lie wasn't just a lie anymore. It was now potential evidence of pretext in a discrimination and retaliation case. Panic, then damage control. I snatched my phone and called my boss, the VP. "We have a problem," I said, my voice strained. "A big one." 10 minutes later, I was in a conference room with 2 corporate litigators. These weren't the friendly lawyers who advise on contracts. They were the janitors who clean up messes like me. I explained the situation, downplaying my lie as a miscommunication. Clara feigned surprise. "Oh dear, that sounds serious. So the streamlined, cost-effective process isn't working out." She threw his own words right back at him. There was a choked sound on the other end. "Listen, this isn't the time for games," he snapped. "This was a terrible mistake. I was misinformed. We need you to come back." "Come back?" Clara asked, her voice dripping with false innocence. "Why would I do that? You made it clear my position was redundant." "It's not redundant. It's the opposite of redundant," he screamed. "Everything is falling apart. You have to come back and fix this. I'll approve your old salary. Right now." Clara let the silence hang. She could hear his ragged breathing. "No," she said, her voice calm and firm. What do you mean, no?" "I mean no, Rick. I was fired. I've moved on." Then he started begging. Actually, genuinely begging. The sound was glorious. "Clara, please. They're going to fire me. The whole company could go under. Think of the employees, their families. You should have thought of that before you called my life's work a fancy piece of paper." "Rick," she replied, her voice turning to ice. "You created this problem. You solve it. Goodbye." And she hung up. It was, as she'd later write, the single most satisfying moment of her entire professional life. But it wasn't over. An hour later, her phone rang again. An unknown number. It was Marcus Thorne, the CEO of Terracon Solutions. "Ms. Wallace," he began, his voice grave, "my name is Marcus Thorne. I want to offer my most sincere, unreserved apology for the actions of my subordinate and for the colossal failure in judgment on the part of this company." This was a different approach. No blustering, just a man staring into the abyss. "I understand Rick is no longer with the company," Marcus continued. "His termination was effective an hour ago." Clara felt a jolt of triumph. Rick was gone. The first domino. "We are in an untenable position, Ms. Wallace," the CEO said. "To be blunt, you are the only person who can help us." "Help you how?" Clara asked. "We need you to reaffiliate your license with us. We're prepared to triple your previous salary. Name your price. We just need to get the lights back on." This was the moment. The ultimate leverage. She could let the company burn. It was tempting. So tempting. But then she thought about David and the other good people who worked there, who didn't deserve to lose their jobs over Rick's ego. So she made a counteroffer. It was audacious, brutal, and brilliant. "I have no interest in returning as an employee, Mr. Thorne," she said coolly. "However, I might be willing to consider a short-term consultancy." "Anything," he breathed. "What are your terms?" "First," she began, "my new firm will be engaged on a 3-month retainer contract to resolve the crisis and oversee existing projects." "Okay, what's the retainer?" he asked, hesitant. Clara took a deep breath. "A one-time, upfront payment of $2 million. Stunned silence. She could hear a faint, muffled, "Oh my God," from someone else in the room with him. "$2 million," he stammered. "That's correct," Clara said, her voice steady as a rock. "It is non-negotiable and payable in full before I make a single phone call. The daily fines are $50,000. The Keystone Bridge contract you just lost was worth $50 million. My price is a bargain. But that's not all." She kept going, laying out her demands. "Second, I will require a written, public apology from the board of directors to me personally, distributed to all staff. Third, you will fund the training for 2 new principal assessors. My firm will oversee their selection. You will never be in this position again. And fourth," she said, delivering the final blow, "my contract will include a key person clause. If I choose to terminate the contract for any reason, you forfeit the remainder of the retainer. I will have absolute autonomy." It was a complete surrender. She was demanding money, control, respect, and a fundamental change in how they operated. The CEO was quiet for a full minute. Clara waited. She had him. "Send over the contract," Marcus Thorne said, his voice heavy with defeat. "You'll have the money by the end of the day." Can you even imagine the power of that moment? Going from fired and humiliated to holding the CEO on the line, dictating terms worth millions? If you're enjoying this story of sweet, sweet revenge, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. I'm curious, have you ever had a boss who completely underestimated you? Let me know your story in the comments below. Now, let's get to the aftermath. The contract was drafted, and the $2 million wire transfer hit Clara's brand new business account that same afternoon. The next morning, Clara Wallace, unemployed for less than 72 hours, walked back into the offices of Terracon Solutions. But this time she wasn't an employee. She was a consultant. She was the boss. The office atmosphere was electric. People stared with a kind of awe. The memo announcing Rick's resignation and the hiring of Clara's firm had already gone out. Everyone knew. They knew she had faced down the dragon and won. Her first meeting was with the CEO and the executive team. They looked beaten. She was professional, cold, and efficient. She laid out her plan to call her contact at the federal agency, explain that the fraud attempt was the act of a single rogue executive, and vouch for the company under her new oversight. It took 2 days of intense calls, cashing in every bit of professional goodwill she had built over the years. The agency, trusting her personally, agreed to lift the fraud investigation and suspend the fines. Terracon could operate again. Clara became a legend. She worked out of the main conference room, and project managers lined up for her signature. She was the final word on everything. She was firm but fair, and helped salvage what was left of their projects. But some clients, like the Keystone Bridge one, were gone forever. The financial hit was immense. The company survived, but it was wounded, humbled, and a lot poorer. Clara fulfilled her 3-month contract to the letter, setting up the training for the 2 new assessors. The day her contract ended, she shook the CEO's hand and walked out for the final time. She had proven her point. The resolution for Clara was even sweeter. With $2 million in the bank and a reputation as the industry's ultimate crisis manager, she launched her own consulting firm. Companies from all over the country sought her out. She became more successful than she ever could have been at Terracon. She was her own boss, set her own terms, and never had to deal with another Rick again. As for Terracon Solutions, they never fully recovered. The financial and reputational damage was too severe. About a year later, the company was bought by a larger rival for a fraction of its former value. The name Terracon Solutions ceased to exist, a quiet end for a company that was once a titan, all because one arrogant manager fired the one person he should have valued most. And that's the end of the story. It's a powerful lesson, isn't it? It's about the hidden power that quiet, competent people so often hold. It shows that true value isn't always in the corner office. Sometimes it's in the thankless work that holds the entire structure together. Clara's story is a fantasy for anyone who has ever felt undervalued or disrespected at work. She didn't just get revenge. She got justice on her own terms. It's a reminder to every manager out there. Be careful who you call overhead. You might just be firing the person who holds your license to operate. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this story as satisfying as I did. If you want more tales of professional revenge and malicious compliance, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a video. It's the best way to support the channel and make sure I can keep finding these incredible stories for you. Until next time, know your worth, and don't be afraid to make them pay for underestimating you.